Actually, if I can briefly, Mr. Chairman, you said in your remarks that my questions were a partisan diatribe. And I do want to briefly point out, I just want to quote from the United States Supreme Court, Justice Stevens' opinion for the majority for 6 justices, where he described laws preventing voter fraud as, quote, protecting public confidence in the integrity of the electoral process, which has independent significance because it encourages citizen participation in the democratic process. As the Carter-Baker report observed, and here the court quotes from Democratic President Jimmy Carter and Republican Secretary of State James Baker, quote, the electoral system cannot inspire public confidence if no safeguard exists to deter or detect fraud or to confirm the identity of voters. So apparently the views of President Jimmy Carter, the views of a 6-justice majority of the Supreme Court are deemed by some members of this committee to be simply a partisan diatribe. And if that's the case, I would ask the chairman, you talked about the laws in Connecticut. Why is it that Connecticut has lower African-American registration and lower African-American turnout than Georgia and Mississippi?
You know, I'm really not here to debate you, Mr. Cruz. I subscribe to Justice Stevens' opinion and to the views of former President Carter, a distinguished Southerner, and I'm going to turn to another distinguished Southerner, Senator Cornyn.
That speaks volumes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with a question for each of the 5 witnesses. In your judgment, are voter ID laws racist? Professor Tolson.
Thank you for that question. So it depends. One thing we have to stop doing is treating all voter ID laws as the same.
Okay, so your answer, I want to move quickly, so it depends is your answer?
Yes, that's my answer.
Okay, so what voter ID laws are racist?
Apologies, Mr. Cruz, your state of Texas, perhaps?
Okay, so you think the entire state of Texas is racist. What about requiring an ID to vote is racist?
So I think, sir, that's pretty reductive. I'm not saying the entire state of Texas is racist.
You just said my state of Texas, so you tell me, what about the Texas voter ID laws is racist?
So the fact that the voter ID law was put into place to diminish the political power of Latinos with racist intent and had been found to have
You're
racist
asserting
intent,
that. What's your evidence for that?
The federal district court that first resolved the constitutionality of Texas's voter ID law.
Okay, so your view is voter ID laws are racist. How about you, Mr. Yang?
I agree with Professor Tolson. Voter ID laws can be racist.
Okay, that's
on the
2.
context.
Mr. Science?
There are some voter ID laws that are racially discriminatory in intent.
How about in practice? In intent, fine, you say there's some racist with a malevolent intent lurking in the back of their mind. But let's just talk about it as a practical matter. When I go to vote, they ask me for my ID. I pull out my ID, I show it to them, I vote. Is that racist?
If the law that requires you to do that was motivated by racially discriminatory intent
What about the
under
effect?
our
Set
Constitution.
aside intent. Set aside intent. I'm asking about the effect.
Yes, in effect, I
Okay,
think that
Ms.
there are
Reardon.
discriminatory effects from a number of voter ID laws.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Reardon.